Hi everyone, how are you all today? I hope you're well. Thank you for joining me for the first half of the video. Now this is the second half of the class. This is Megan and we're just here for the second half of our English class, which is on intercultural awareness and the terms, and also just to help you with the homework for today. Okay, so let's go. These are some of the terms that we will use in our Intercultural Awareness class. Culture, prejudice, discrimination, ethnic, nationality, stereotype, race, etiquette, customs, religion, society, and bias. But do you know what they mean? So you can pause the video here while you have a think about that. Some of the words you might know from last week's class. Okay, so from last week's class, we looked at discrimination, we looked at bias, and we looked at stereotypes. So maybe you remember that bias is if you have an opinion about something or swayed in a certain way towards one side or another. So for example, the example we had last week was the football supporters who might be biased towards their football team. A stereotype was an idea that we had about a country that may or may not be true, and we talked about some of the popular Irish stereotypes that appear during St. Patrick's Day. I think that they're untrue, but maybe you might disagree with me. And then finally we talked about discrimination, and discrimination is when somebody has had a negative experience because of maybe their age, maybe their race, maybe their gender. And the example that we used was the example of the ATMs in the banks today. Today, if you go into a bank, it could be quite discriminatory towards the elderly people. Just thinking of my own family there. And there are very few people in banks these days. So unless you're very computer savvy and unless you can use the ATMs and the machines, then you might have a little bit of difficulty in a bank. So I suppose that's a little bit of discrimination there. And so they were the three examples that we had last week. But today we're going to look at the other words to see what we think that they mean. Okay, so let's move on. So open the Learning Objective 2, Terms Associated with Culture document. That's on the Show Me page. It's called LO2, Terms Associated with Culture. On page 2, match the words to their meanings. And then, on page 1, write these definitions beside the correct word. So you can pause this video here while you do that. And I'm just going to move on. So, examples of the use of these terms. So on page 3, think of and give examples of each of these terms. So, in other words, can you put those terms into a sentence? So have a think about that and pause the video here while you do that. Okay, so these are some examples that you might want to use. So race, for example, there is only one human race. Ethnic, so travellers are recognised as an ethnic group. Culture, a country's culture includes language, dance, music and food. Nationality is being a citizen of a country, or my nationality is Irish. Society is a community or a group in a country, or modern society is very fast-paced. Customs, traditions or social norms in a country, such as the St. Patrick's Day parade or a wake. So an example of an Irish custom would be the St. Patrick's Day parade or a wake. Now, what is a wake, I hear you ask? Well, in Irish culture, if someone passes away or dies, we will have a wake before the funeral. And a wake is where all of the family members and neighbours and members of the community come to say their respects before the person is buried. And Usually there's tea and sandwiches, depending on the week. Okay, so let's move on. Then we have etiquette. Etiquette is to be mannerly. So for example, she has good table etiquette. Religion are the main belief systems of a country. For example, Ireland's main religion is Catholicism. Bias, we talked about last week, is taking sides unfairly. So for example, the referee in the Gaelic football match was biased in his decision to give Donegal a penalty. I wonder why. I wonder was Megan the referee? Okay, prejudiced is to have preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. So for example, Irish people are prejudiced against... I'm not really sure what we're prejudiced against, to be perfectly honest. I could think of a few adjectives, but I'm not going to finish that sentence if we're putting this up on YouTube. So I think it's safer. So stereotype is to have an idea about a group of people that may or may not be true. So the stereotypes that we talked about last week were a stereotype about Irish people is that they all drink Guinness. Now, I'm not sure that that's true. And discrimination is to treat people unfairly due to age, sex, nationality, or ability. So for example, I didn't get the job and I was discriminated against because of my age. Okay, so these are some examples or some sentences that you could use to fill in page 3 of the LO2 document on terms for intercultural awareness. Okay, so guys, that just takes me to the end of the lesson, our plenary exercise, and I want you guys to tell me one new thing that you learned today. And also guys, please send me the LO2 terms document for your portfolios for assessment so that you can get your certificate. Okay guys, thanks very much. See you next week. Thank you. Bye.